There are provisions that are being extended today by virtue of our debate and vote that Republicans don't object to. We have heard a lot of objection, certainly revolving around the mask mandate in schools, and I'm going to sort of just focus on that area in particular. You know, when I look at this legislation and my vote today, I look at it through the eyes of a child, not through the eyes of an adult, because I think throughout this entire pandemic, it is where government has failed. I don't know why, but the focus always has seemed to revolve around the adults, the elderly population, who we identified as the most vulnerable. And I would submit that our children are the most vulnerable throughout this pandemic. You know, they were least impacted by this virus from a physical standpoint. And there's always this notion that children are adaptable. And so we can just sort of tell them what to do and they'll figure it out. But I reflect and I look at what their new normal has been for 2 years, and I am horrified to think of what permanency have we created with putting masks on children for so long. You know, when the pandemic started in March of 2020, and the governor came out with his phases of reopening, you know, our focus really have revolved around the adult world. You think about it, we had phase 1 and phase 2 and phase 3, and we had essential services identified. And I think about when it began, how my kids immediately had to leave their schools, and they were sort of shuttered into their rooms to learn virtually. That was a dramatic transition for them. And then we had rules, you know, locally where you could go shopping, but they wanted one person in a store at a time. So naturally, the adults with the car keys would get in their vehicles and go shopping. There was some level of interaction. Even in those early days of isolation, they had some level of normalcy. The children remained home. And I think it created great stressors on them. Fortunately, you know, our school system stepped to the plate, and in September of 2020, many of them reopened in person, and some didn't. For that entire school year, we had children learning in isolation. And when they returned to their schools, it was a very different environment for them. They were learning 6-foot spacing. They couldn't talk to each other in the cafeteria. Some were eating outside. And they all have had to wear masks throughout this entire process. And what was frustrating to me is back when we had extended these orders, one of the amendments that we ran on the House Republican side that failed was we asked for a public hearing before executive orders were put down. And that amendment failed. And I think the reason why we believed it was so important, and we understood the executive branch needed to manage this pandemic, but we felt it was important for people's voices to be heard. You know, we certainly heard from our restaurant owners, and we heard from business owners, that hairdressers that needed to be able to open back up. And they had their voices, but the ones that really didn't have a voice were our children. And there was never a public hearing process. And so on Tuesday, I thought it was a very historic moment when the legislature finally reasserted itself that we held that public hearing. And we heard from hundreds of parents that talked about the impacts to their children. And I think today that's what this is really all about. And so some of us could say that this is potentially a matter of weeks. But for many parents, they believe it's almost too late for their child. And that's scary. And I think that this is probably one of the biggest failures of this administration. Because back in August, there were many members, especially the ones that have children in these schools, that were concerned of the quarantine rules that were put in place. And those rules were a big departure from our neighboring state of Massachusetts, where they had a test and stay program that minimized the number of children that were quarantined. Connecticut didn't do that. Not only did they not do it, they sort of ignored it. And we held a press conference. We called on the administration to look at it, and they said no. Soon thereafter, in the emergence of Omicron, all of a sudden they got rid of the contact tracing for the kids. We're just going to ignore it, let school continue on. And they managed. Through the Omicron spikes, our schools stayed open, and there weren't major issues. And to me, it suggested maybe we really missed the boat on our kids. Maybe we were too restrictive all this time. But we will never know because we didn't do the research that should have been done. When I asked the commissioner over and over again of public health for what is the data on contact tracing and the transmissibility in schools among children, they wouldn't give me the information. Finally, on February 4th, I got a letter saying we didn't collect it. And we're not contact tracing anymore, so it doesn't matter. And if you want the data, contact your local districts for the data. Our children deserve better than this. We should have been tracking it for all these months. Because when I look at the World Health Organization, who has recommended that children under the age of 5 not be masked, and in Europe, no one under the age of 12 is recommended to be masking, because they weighed the benefits of protecting against the virus versus the impacts on these children, their educational impact, their socialization impact, their cues. I mean, the first thing when a baby is born, you get into their face and you smile at them. And those social cues carry on throughout all of the early parts of their lives, especially in daycare settings. We bring our children into daycares to socialize them. Their world is very different than our world right now, still to this day. And I talk to our daycare workers who have the stressors of trying to educate these children and provide the social emotional learning that was so important to this institution, that we continue to pass legislation over time to make sure we got those pieces right. It has all been discarded for the last 2 years. And these teachers have their work cut out for them over the next decade. And I don't know if we could have done better, but I think we could have done better. And it is frustrating from this side of the aisle, who raised this issue back in the fall, to be ignored throughout the entire process. And for the governor to say to us, we want you to vote on a mask mandate. Couldn't wait to get this vote before our chamber because he wanted us to weigh in. And I said it back then, I'm more than happy to take that vote. But what happens? The administration at the 11th hour, while we're deliberating this, we're setting down the public hearing, throws a curveball and says, let's get rid of the masks. Well, what changed? You have no data. You've collected nothing up until this point to demonstrate why you're doing what you're doing. And so I throw a flag on the field, because what's happened now is we have chaos through 169 towns. We have Board of Educations that don't want to make this decision, and they shouldn't have to make this decision. And we have a legislature that's left without any empirical information to make the right decision for our children. But what I do know anecdotally from the hundreds and hundreds of parents that are frantic and desperate over what their children have gone through. And my kids have worn masks through this process, but it's impacted them. And we all know they're falling off their faces. They're barely, I mean, they need to be snug. These aren't even snug. They're at their chin by homeroom. And there's a reason for that, because it's not right. It doesn't belong. So the one generation that was physiologically the least impacted by this virus had been the most impacted by all of the restrictions that the state of Connecticut put on them. And so we certainly could tout the fact that Connecticut did a great job of minimizing the transmission and maybe minimizing the deaths in the state of Connecticut. But at what cost? And that is why I'm an emphatic no vote today on these executive orders. And I ask everybody, when you look at this legislation, look at it through the lens of a child, not an adult. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.